belong to a mutual admiration society. My baby and me, we belong to a mutual admiration society.
Hello, welcome to yet another podcast of the millions of podcasts that exist in the whole podcast space and universe. My name is Ryan, and you are listening to the Mutual Aberration Society, and episode 1. This is the first of many, so welcome, hello, greetings, all of that good stuff. Today, on this first episode, I am going to talk about a film that I feel doesn't get talked about at all in any kind of, at least in any sort of cult circles or mainstream circles. It's just, if you look this film up, you're not going to find a lot about it, because people just don't really know about it. And that's going to be a big part of this podcast, is talking about things that people don't tend to talk about. Films, novels, random topics I feel like aren't being addressed in any sort of significant, substantial way. Not only in the podcast kind of space, but also just in the discourse in general. So the film that's I'm going to be talking about is a film from 1983, and it's called Hunting Ground. But it also has a few other titles. Another title is Code of Hunting, and another title, which is the original Spanish title of the film, is Coto de Caza. And to give you a brief kind of overview or synopsis of what the film is actually about, I'm just going to read, this is from the BAMFA website, which is the University of California, Berkeley Art Museum and Specific Film Archive. It's literally from their website. So it says, Coto de Caza, which won top honors in Spain for its script, provoked a great deal of controversy in the press for the questions it throws open regarding the causes and control of delinquency. While some critics cite it as an apology for vigilante action, others agree with the producers that the film is a modern-day tragedy, a harsh film reflecting the sad reality of life today. The story involves a woman who, as a criminal lawyer, is convinced that society is responsible for delinquency. Following a brutal attack by a group of delinquent youths, her position changes and she betrays her ideals, avenging herself without waiting for the decision of the courts. As one critic notes, the film is not an apology for violence, but the chronology of a double disillusionment, that a pacifist ends up overcome by violence, and that the two worlds, bourgeois and proletariat, appear condemned never to understand one another. Now, that's a pretty good overview of sort of the themes about, the film kind of, covers. Now, I will say this. This film is definitely, it definitely falls under the umbrella of, like, the revenge thriller. Even, the rape revenge sort of subgenre. So let's just, on the front end, I'm gonna give everyone a content warning. This story is doesn't shy away from sexual assault and it definitely and violence. Let's just be clear, if that's not your thing, maybe tune into episode 2, where maybe I'll be discussing something that isn't so, let's be honest, unflinching is a good word for it. Now, that being said, this is a very kind of, this type of film has a lot of stigma for obvious reasons. Now there are films that, like, I Spit on Your Grave, Miss 45, even Last House on the Left, that traffic in this in this kind of the same kind of terrain that Hunting Ground does. But I'll give Hunting Ground, I want to separate Hunting Ground, though. I want to highlight those films as a comparison to, like, just to let people know sort of what they're getting themselves in for before they watch this movie. I would like to highlight those films specifically, but also I want to make a distinction from those films to this film, because typically in a sort of like rape revenge story, it's usually set up fairly fast. You meet the protagonist, and at some point early on in the first act, the protagonist becomes a victim of a horrible, brutal assault and attack, and that becomes sort of what begins to push the character forward. The woman. Let's be honest; these aren't stories about men being sexually assaulted ever. This is about women, at the hands of men, committing this horrible, fucking act of rape, and then the woman sets about, on a quest for revenge, retribution. Now, Hunting Ground, while it does have instances of that kind of, I don't know if you want to call it a, I don't know if I would necessarily call it a plot engine, you know what I mean, like, or a plot device, but Hunting Ground, while it has that aspect and those aspects to it, it's a little different because, like I was saying, in your typical kind of story like this, in this type of subgenre, like I said, like the horrible act happens in the first act, and then everything that happens after that is like the character going about, doling out, justice, the way she is able to do it and dispense it because, she's not going to wait because there's no one there to help. It's just, a woman getting, it's a revenge fantasy, Now, Hunting Ground doesn't really have the majority of the movie. None of that actually, like, it's not front loaded with the actual main character, whose name is Adela, who is a lawyer, a very idealistic lawyer, a wife and a mother of 2 kids. Nothing happens to Adela in the beginning. Now, things do happen, but nothing in terms of assault happens early. That actually happens at the very end of the film. It's like Hunting Ground has this impending doom, this impending sense of doom that you just know everything is building to. Even when her husband is killed, which happens in the, at the midway point, even when he's killed, that isn't the actual, as shocking and as again unflinching as the moment when he is killed in front of her, and his own mother, by the way. That's still not the moment that is typically the sort of inciting incident, to use screenwriting terminology. I would like the fact that her assault falls at the very end of the film really kind of speaks to the type of approach that the director and the filmmakers took when making this film. Like it really, I feel like it really sets itself apart in that respect from the other films I mentioned. It's a well-crafted movie. It has a great cast, and I just feel like this is one of those movies that, like, I felt like, yo, if I'm gonna start doing a podcast talking about, like, the stuff that, like, the weird kind of, lesser-known esoteric shit that I'm into, I need to start with this one, because I know, like, it's just a matter of time before this movie gets discovered and becomes, like, I don't know, like, part of the zeitgeist, or part of the, or at least develop some sort of cult sort of, this is just one of those films that I'm watching, I'm like, yo, I don't understand how this film doesn't really have a larger cult following, but I know that it will. And I do believe that there is a new, like, 2K Blu-ray out there. I think it's like Mondo Macabre, or one of those sort of boutique Blu-ray labels. I think they just put this out. I've seen this movie probably, like, I don't know, a year ago, and I saw, like, a really crappy, like, VHS, like, rip of it. But then I recently rewatched it, and I did see a higher quality version of it. And it's just, yeah, both versions blew me away. This is just one of those films that I'm like, yo, I gotta talk about this, because I feel like it just has all of the elements that, like, any sort of, like again, like, I know this type of film isn't for everyone, it just isn't, all right? But I will say this, of those other films that I named, and of the films of this type of genre, I would say this one would be the one that I would recommend over the others, simply for the fact that, like, again, the care and the way that it goes about, like, the story unfolds, while it has exploitation elements, it's done in a way that, again, like, it is more about telling of a story. And even like I said before, like, it's like, these are, like, yes, it stars a beautiful actress, and but she's a good actress. She's not, you know what I mean? It's not like she's giving a great performance. In fact, her performance actually makes what happens to her all the more horrible, because it's like she's really enduring, like, in terms of, like, the relationships that she has with her, not only her beliefs in terms of, like, what she believes in and her own, like, ideals as a lawyer fighting for, like, criminal justice, right? Like, not only is she endearing on that level, but every character that she knows, that she interacts with, like, she's just like her husband. They clearly have a loving relationship. Her children, like just makes you more. It's like, and again, these performances, and even the performance by the villain, who's a character named, his name is Maury. You know what I'm saying? Like, and Maury's he's a bastard. Let's just be honest. Like, dude is a piece of shit. Like, but just very good at just being a piece of shit. Very memorable, a memorable face and a memorable performance. I'm highlighting these things to say, yo, this isn't, like, again, not to, point at other films, but I'm gonna fucking point at another film. This isn't I Spit on Your Grave, and that's not to really say, hey, I Spit on Your Grave isn't, that's not me casting my own, like, some sort of, like, opinion about I Spit on Your Grave specifically right now. That's not what I'm really doing. Honestly, I haven't seen I Spit on Your Grave in years. But I will say this. There is a difference between that and Hunting Ground. And Hunting Ground is the sort of like film that I would feel a little bit more comfortable with if I was to say you want to see something in that kind of like revenge thriller, rape revenge subgenre. I would point people this way because again, the way I feel it's handled, it's handled with a lot more care and just again like you can tell you're in the hands of a filmmaker. And I believe the director is George Grau. Now it's George, but it might be Jorge. It's spelled with a J, but he's a Spaniard, and he's from I think he's like from Madrid. And I'm familiar with some of his other films. I think he did a zombie movie, and I can't remember the name of it. It was like something Manchester. I think it's like Manchester Living Dead or something like that. He's got a few other films that I'm familiar with, but like this film like really made me want to go watch all of his other films that I can get my eyes on because like again like this movie, it's just like a series. The way it unfolds and the way that you see sort of both the antagonist, which is the villain, and the protagonist, which is our heroine, Adela. The way you see both of them sort of on this kind of like slow motion kind of collision, like where it's like that like with each interaction they have, it's just going to get more and more awful until ultimately it builds to the very end where yes, it gets very, very unpleasant. But it really actually, again, like I said, this happens at the very end. So like there's a fast resolution to that moment too. So it's not like just like, oh, and again, I feel like that's one of the ways that, Hunting Ground distinguishes itself from the other kind of, rape revenge movies. Because again, it's not a film that like lives in that moment and then like just the whole, then like, oh, you have a whole hour or another 2 hours as this person sort of like sets about, having to not only like deal with what just happened, but also the audience having to sort of deal with what just happened. No, that happens at the very end, and then very shortly after it happens, she gets her revenge, which is why, again, I say this is more of a rape revenge movie where it's not even like, again, like that's not even the driving aspect of the plot because it doesn't happen until the very end of the movie. It's just so the way it starts is we're introduced to Adela as in the courtroom, and she's defending a man who's on trial for committing various crimes, and you get to hear her philosophy and how how she is someone who believes in the idea of like reform and giving people second chances, and how like our society creates the conditions which gives birth to crime. Like, what I'm saying? Like, crime is in and of itself a product of poverty and people being poor. In the most simplistic sort of way, that we know it. Like, yes, like, you know, a lot of criminal kind of, a lot of things that are um, deemed criminal are criminalized, or because, it's just people being poor. Like, again, like how many times have we seen, like, oh, somebody, you're not allowed to be here, you don't have a home, but therefore you're committing a crime, you're being a vagrant, and therefore, somehow being homeless is criminalized. But again, like, that speaks to sort of like the type of society that we live under. That's a very, now this is Spain, and obviously this isn't America, but still the same principle applies. And we're introduced to Adela, like, in the courtroom, sort of, and we're exposed to her, sort of like, again, her idealistic principles. Now, at the same time, in the same courtroom, watching, in the audience is Maury. Maury and one of his flunkies. They're literally sitting there watching, and they're making, these guys are like, again, you automatically know when you see this guy and you see his friend, you already know, like, within 2 seconds, oh, like, yeah, these guys are pieces of shit. And basically, they're making comments about her, saying, how they would like to have sex with her, and just all kinds of fucking wild shit, because, again, these guys are very much, they're class acts. They're real fucking gems. But after the court is adjourned, we see Adela, drive to the grocery store, and while she's inside getting groceries, we see Maury outside as he walks up to her car, breaks in, steals it. They literally steal her car. And when Adela comes out, she's like, obviously surprised. Where's my car go? Then we go to her home, where she arrives by taxi, with her groceries. And that's where she goes inside, and we meet her family for the first time. We meet her husband, David, who's a doctor, and we meet her 2 children, or I'm sorry, not David. David's the name of her son. The name of her husband is George. George is a doctor. And her son, David, and their daughter, Laura, I believe. That is, yeah, David and Laura, I believe, is the name of their 2 kids. And, like, David is probably, I don't know, 10 years old, maybe. And then the daughter is probably 6, maybe 6 years old. Very young children. But, Adela comes in, and they have no idea, because she's very, she's just coming home as if it's nothing's happened. She's, embracing her kids, saying hello, embracing her husband. But then she pulls her husband to the kitchen. And in the kitchen, she tells him, hey, like, someone stole my car. And, and obviously he's like, what do you mean someone stole your car? And she tells him, like, yeah, she stole my car. And it had all my court documents that I needed in there. And I also had, for some reason, the land deed to a house they have that they own out in the country that they like to go during the weekends. Which comes back into play because we see Maury, he goes and gets another friend of his. And now the third guy, in the tree, it's like the character's name is Travolta. Like, so Travolta comes with them and takes his car out into the middle of nowhere, and he takes the speaker out, and as they're kind of like looting the car for whatever they can get for out of it, he comes across the documents, the land deed, etc. Like, and he knows that they have a house, and Maury hatches a plan to, let's go to this house and let's rob this lady. I mean, she clearly has money. I mean, they have a house out in the country. She's a lawyer. Let's just go rob her. Like, let's just go in there and commit this burglary. So that hatches that plan. Okay, so then, now, this plan is hatched, and of course, Adela has no idea, like, that this is happening. So, and they have plans to go to the house on the weekend. Like, that was the plan. Like, now they're still gonna go, and do that. obviously Adela, she reports, her car stolen, and of course the police tell her, there's literally like, he says something to the effect of like, yo, there's like 26 cars, you know, um, in my precinct alone that have been reported stolen. Now multiply that by all of the other police departments that you have around Spain or whatever in the city. And she's like, and that'll give you, a sense of like what we're dealing with. So like the chances are very slim, in terms of us like finding your car right away, if at all. So she gets that news or whatever. Boom. And this is a little kind of chronologically out of order. I'm just sort of, giving you Ryan's version of the of a of a story synopsis. But the plan is still to go, whether she has a car or not. They'll just take her husband's car down there. They'll drive all down there together because they're going to be there for the weekend at that house with the family. And also, George says he's going to take David with him on a hunting trip, and we literally see, George in a boat with two other men and David. And David's literally got a giant VHS camera, and he's like recording him as they're like, literally floating through the lake with shotguns, and they're going to, they're duck hunting. So David's recording his father as he shoots, him and the guys in the boat shooting ducks, and then their dog literally jumps out the boat to swims in the water and to retrieve the ducks. It's a whole kind of like rite of passage thing, with like him taking his son on the hunt. And he even makes David put down the camera, and he's like, "Hey, David, put down the camera." David hands the camera to one of the other guys in the boat, and he lets the kid hold the gun. And then, he's like, "All right, now take a shot." He just shoots it in the air, and then he gives him a shell. He's like, "Here's, it's your first shell," or whatever. And you got that whole moment of like, David bonding, with his father. So then after the hunt, we see the house, because David and George return from the hunt, and at the house is Adela. She's literally typing away, working on some court stuff on a typewriter, and her daughter's running around playing. And then she sees that they're home. They run out to greet them. So David, David's like, he wants to go play outside with the dog in the backyard, so he runs out to do that. And George, he goes and he puts on some music, and as the music's playing and David's in the backyard running around, we see Maury looking, like literally watching like the house. And he's, Travolta's there, the other guy, which I forget his name completely, but the guy that's with him from the very beginning, that while he steals the cards in the courtroom, and a fourth, Maury's younger brother, Johnny. They're all there, and they're looking at the house, and then they're just like, this, I thought, no, they're there. They must, and this is something to the effect of, well, yeah, they must be, it's pretty much quickly deduced that they must be there for the weekend or whatever. So the plan becomes, well, we'll just wait until nighttime, and someone, one of the guys, mentions the dog. He's like, well, what about the dog? And he's like, man, we'll just poison the dog. We'll just give the dog some meat, poison him, and like, don't worry, what about the guard? There's an old guard, in a guard shack that like kind of like guards the area where they're, it's like, I guess it's some sort of neighborhood, some sort of like villa of some sort with an actual guard. But they're like, we'll sneak around. He's nothing. He's an old dude. He'll probably fall asleep. We'll get around the guard. We'll poison the dog. We'll go in and we'll just, we'll burglarize the place and take what we want. Boom. So that's the plan. Now, after the weekend, I guess they'll come back at night after they leave. So Adela and her family head back into town. Now, because Adela doesn't have a car, she gets dropped off at work. Her husband's at the hospital. He was supposed to pick up, his mother, who's coming to visit at I think it's like the Barcelona airport. His mother was coming to visit. She wants to see the kids or whatever. Now, typically he would have just went, but because his wife doesn't have a car, he's like, well, they have to pick, he has to pick her up. So they go together to pick up their mother. Now, when they we meet George's mother, and she's a really, it's really funny because like the relationship that like George has with his mother and the relationship that Adela has with his mother, I feel like is really like one of those like sort of like, you know, the type of relationship that like a wife would have with her mother-in-law and a son would have with his mother, and that whole dynamic. I feel like it's pretty like Adela, like you could, like she's definitely her and her husband's mother definitely have a rapport, but like you can tell like like his mom is just like a little bit much. She's a mom, but still, it's like it's all good, whatever. And she mentions to them like, "Yo, I'm gonna let's go." Like Adela's gotta take the car, so we're gonna drive back to our place, and Adela will take the car because she's got to get some court documents that she left because they were rushing to leave, because they both had work in the morning once they were leaving from the after their weekend at the house. But their mom's like, no, we'll go together. It makes no sense. Like, why would I go wake the children up potentially if they're already asleep, and you guys came to pick me up at the airport? They need their rest. I want to see that. I want to see your guys' house out there anyways. So it's like, all right, cool. So now you have showing up unexpectedly, Adela, George, and George's mom. They're all driving down. Now, Maury and his guys, this is the night that they've decided to burglarize the house. So, when they arrive, they pull up. Adela thinks she hears something. Now, she's not quite sure what it is, but Maury's like, just relax, whatever, it's fine. Maury's like, just, I'll be right, like, I'll grab your papers, whatever, I'll be right in, like, just don't worry about it. And Adela's like, okay, cool, whatever. So he's going to run in the house. Boom. And Adela hears the dog whimpering. So Adela gets out while her mom's, while George's mom is waiting in the car. She goes out to check on the dog. She sees the dog is sick or whatever. And she's like, hey, like, what's wrong with the dog? Is he sick? What's wrong with the dog? And this is before, George has made it into the house. So he comes back and he looks at the dog and he's like, yeah, the dog is clearly sick. I mean, they don't know the dog's been poisoned. George thinks the dog may have rabies because literally the dog's laying there moaning. It's got like foam coming from his mouth. And he's like, well, listen, I'm going to go get the shotgun. We got to put him out of his misery. It's probably rabies. And she's like, of course, Adela's like, what? No, don't do that. We should take him to the vet. He's like, there's no point. It's too late. Look, he's too far gone. It's the middle of the night. He's like, the kids are home sleeping without, we got to get back. Like, it's what we got to do. So he runs back into the house. Boom, whatever. Now, this leaves Adela with the dog, and she's sitting there looking at the dog or whatever. And then at some point, she heads toward the house, and as she's heading towards the house, she sees a silhouette of a man coming out with the shotgun, and of course she thinks it's her husband, but it's not. It's Maury, and she sees Maury pointing the shotgun right at her. And at this point, Maury grabs her, sees, and makes, yells to the car, and makes George's mother get out, and they bring them in the house. Where they find George along with Travolta and the other guy from the other flunky inside, and they're holding him at gunpoint. Now, at this point, the jig is up in terms of like they've been busted burglarizing the home. So they're holding this family, and of course, there's a lot of arguments back and forth, and the people saying, and even Adela tries to bargain with Maury. Maury's making lewd comments because again, this guy's a real fucking piece of work. He's making sexual suggestive comments about Adela, even some shit towards the grandmother. They're fighting. At one point, one of the guys punches Adela's not Adela, but punches George's mom in the stomach, like, you know what I mean? Like, as they're, like, struggling and shit. Now, George is, like, fucking pissed, obviously. What actually happens, what ends up happening is a struggle ensues between Maury and George, as George is grabbing for the shotgun, and as they struggle, as they're fighting, the shotgun goes off, and literally peels my man's cap back. Boom, blows off fucking George's head. That obviously freezes everybody, freezes Adela, freezes her mother-in-law, all the men inside. Oh shit, you know what I mean? Like fuck, this wasn't supposed to go down. No one was supposed to be here. Now they got a murder on their hands. So they're freaking the fuck out. The women begin to cry and mourn, and fucking Maury and them get the fuck out of Dodge. They leave. Obviously, he threatens them, what I'm saying, on the way out or whatever. But they have to go. There's no time, like the guard is awakened, and he can hear that gunshot. They're like, let's go. We take what we got. Let's get the hell out of here. Boom. Now, they're heading out. But remember, I mentioned that Maury's had a brother. His younger brother was actually they had him waiting in another vehicle, because they had two vehicles. They had another vehicle that they were going to throw all the shit in a van that they were stealing, and then they had the brother waiting as a lookout, and apparently not a really good lookout, because he didn't say shit when these people pulled up to begin with. But another thing that you need to know about Johnny, which is Maury's little brother, is that he's an epileptic, and he's literally in a car having an epileptic seizure as this shit is going on. And they leave. Now, as they're heading away, Maury remembers his brother, and he freaks the fuck out and says, yo, we got to go back for my brother. And they're like, nah, man, we got to go. He's grown. He'll get the fuck out of there. He knows what to do. But Maury's not trying to hear that. A struggle ensues. They end up the van ends up hitting a tree. They get pissed. They're like, hey, man, come back with me. And they're like, no, Maury, fuck you. They leave on foot to get the fuck out of there. And Maury goes back to see about where his brother is. Now, when he gets there, the cops are already there. Like, literally, I think the guard is there, and, like, a cop or, a cop car's there. So he's like, fuck, so he gets the hell out of there. Now, flash forward, to Adela riding behind, with her two children and her mother-in-law riding behind a hearse, because it is her husband's funeral. And it becomes one of those things where, like, now we're tracking sort of, the family dealing with the death and loss of not only her, not only Adela's loss of her husband, and, but the children's loss of their father, and her mother's loss of her, her son. And at the same time, Adela has to, like, go to, the police and give her story, and, she's able to identify Maury. They have, because of this brother, they could put two and two together. They show her a picture because they have his brother in custody, and there's a discussion about, like, well, she's like, I never saw him, like, if he was there, I never saw him. He wasn't in the house, so I know he's not the one. And she even goes as far as to say, which speaks to sort of who Adela is as a person, right? That, like, she's like, yo, the gun went off by accident. Like, he didn't actually intend to kill my husband, and at this whole time, she's just trying to be honest, and it comes back to her, like, ideals and her principles, right? She's trying to be honest, even though she has every reason to hate these people. And make sure that and she's a lawyer, and she works in the criminal justice system. She has every reason to want these guys buried, you know what I mean? Like, to get these motherfuckers out of there, but she still adheres to her sort of beliefs and her own principles about, like, that's not what she believes in. So she's telling them, like, no, the brother, like, he had nothing to do with it. Even if he was there, he wasn't I didn't see him in the house, and again, like, he didn't intend to kill my husband. The gun went off. He didn't actually shoot him. The gun went off during the struggle. But she identifies Maury because Maury has a rap sheet, and he has, mug shots and all that shit. And, you know what I mean? So they're like, we can't find him. We're still on the lookout, or whatever. And, now Maury, on the other hand, like, now he's hiding out. Like, and we see Maury, he literally, He's at an arcade, and Travolta's walking by his house, and he sees the cops there. So he keeps walking, and he goes into the arcade and tells Maury, hey, yo, the cops are at your fucking house. So Maury eases his way out, sees him, and he's like, okay, so he makes off. He's like, let me get the hell out of here. And then this Maury shaves his face, dyes his hair, literally dyes his hair. It's like orange, like just, and he's gonna lay low. He ends up fucking sleeping in like a boxing gym, like, but like he's hiding out. Now at the same time though, his mother, which we get introduced to a little early in the story when we first, after Maury steals the car. There's a moment where we sort of see, Maury in his home life. And that's when we see his brother, that's where we meet his younger brother, Johnny, at first. In fact, Johnny's at work, working for, he was at work. He was supposed to be at work, but he gets fired from his job. And Maury ends up showing up at his job because Johnny tells him, what the guy, a mechanic, I guess he worked as a mechanic at some car shop. He tells him that, like, yo, you can't, you can't fire me, more or less. I'll tell my brother. And he's like, you don't want to tell your brother. I know a lot about your brother. Insinuating that, like, he would snitch on Maury. So Maury's like, what? I'm not trying to have that. So Maury shows up to his job and beats the shit out of this guy in front of his brother and then tells him, see, you don't need a job. Stick with me, whatever. Now, during that whole sequence or whatever, we're introduced to Maury and Johnny's mother. And she is she's a sex worker. She literally is a prostitute. It's mentioned, it's dropped or whatever. So, Johnny's in jail. Now, Johnny's younger, I think, so he's like in this, like, I don't know if it's necessarily like some sort of like juvenile, like whatever, Spain's version of like a juvenile delinquent center or whatever, but he's there and there's a priest that like is like talking to him and asking him to be an altar boy and like saying like, like, listen, Johnny, like, I know you're young, your brother is, you didn't have anything to do with this, your brother's a bad influence, like, I'm here for you, whatever. And it's even, the preacher puts his hand on his thigh. It's suggested that the preacher's sort of on some, like, Catholic priest shit, on some, like, pedophiles type shit. It's more than subtly suggested. Like, it's not at all subtle. But also another aspect of that is what Johnny doesn't realize is that inside the jail, whatever kind of jail it is, the kiddie jail, that like they perceive you, if you're an altar boy and you like work, and you're close to the priest, they perceive you to be one, either being in some sort of like sick pedophile type relationship with the priest, or you're a snitch, right? So his mother comes to visit him and she tells him to stay away from him because they'll think you're a snitch, and we're not no fucking snitches in this family. Again, this family doesn't want, snitches get stitches, stop snitching. That's a whole thing, like for the whole family. Top to that, like they're not about the snitch life. They're not snitching on nobody. You know what I'm saying? Like that's clear from all of them, from Maury to his mom to his son or whatever. But this is just creates a huge dilemma because they're like, Maury doesn't want his brother in there, while he's hiding out, and his mother wants him out of there. So there's pressure. So Maury's like, we need to apply pressure on Adela. You know what I'm saying? Like, we need to get him out of there. So what we need to do, it doesn't matter that she's told the police that it was an accident and that it doesn't matter. We need to get her to say none of it happened and she was wrong, so that they will release him and get him the fuck out of there. So he sets about, and not only that, but the mom actually visits her in a very fucking like a well-acted scene. Like the woman, she's at her office, and she comes in to meet her, and she's like, yo, you're the mother of the of the man who shot my husband. You know what I mean? Or I'm the mother. She even introduces herself. I'm the mother of the guy who kills your husband or whatever. And she even, I think even in that moment, she says, well, he didn't shoot him. The gun went off. Again, back to like Adela's, that's as much of a good person she is. Even though she feels very, justifiably upset, and she's still grieving and going through the whole process of like, yo, I just lost my husband. She's still, a woman of principles, and she still like is trying to adhere to that, like her own nice ideology about this whole thing, right? But of course, an argument breaks out, and she asks her to leave because she's saying she's basically. And again, you got two mothers really, and one's a widow, and then you got another mother whose son is like in jail, and another son who's literally on the run for killing, being involved in the death of this other woman's husband. And yeah, it's a pretty good scene. But like I said, so at that point the mother's already tried to talk to him. Now and Maury's like, fuck, we got to get him out. So Maury starts making phone calls to Adela and threatening Adela and saying, yo, like, you need to come and you need to go tell the fucking police that everything that you said is a lie. I need my brother out of there. Boom. He's giving her fucking harassing phone calls or whatever. Now, it's about this is about Christmas time when this is happening. So Adela goes, her mother-in-law's obviously staying there with her and the children, as they're kind of like, grieving and still kind of like, so it's mom's going to be home for the holidays with the family. So Adela's out about shopping at night to get presents, and as she's buying presents, she's exiting the department store in the parking lot with presents for her children. She's confronted by Maury and his homies. You know what I mean? Like, they pull up on her and they make her get in the car and they have her start driving. And in the car he's threatening her, telling her again, like, yo, you're gonna do what I say. Like, you're and then he's groping her. You know what I'm saying? He's like assaulting her. You know what I mean? Like, now he doesn't rape her, but I mean he's like forcing himself on her. Like, he's like kisses her. He's like he takes a blade out and literally cuts her sweater to expose her breast. Then he has Travolta like kiss her too. He's like, yo, whatever. But all of this is like he's intimidating her and telling her like, yo, like, you're gonna do what we say. Like, this is our there's gonna be issues. There's gonna be fucking problems. I need my brother out. You need to do this by tomorrow. Now, his brother, having already spoken with his mother, and he's already and he's hearing comments from other like inmates about his relationship with the priest. He's already like thinking, oh shit, like what have I, the priest tricked me. Like, I didn't know being an altar boy or associating with this priest would reflect upon me badly inside here. And now people think I'm a snitch, or they think I'm his lover. So he decides to flip out on the priest in front of everybody while the priest is giving a sermon. And he flips the fuck out and causes a scene, and they end up putting him in like solitary confinement, by himself. But in solitary confinement, he's in there flipping the fuck out and screaming for the guards, and they're telling him to shut up, and they're giving him, and they're leaving him by himself. But he has one of his epileptic seizures, and he hits his head, and there's no one there to answer, to help, like, because they figure he's just in there fucking, wilding the fuck out. So he dies in prison. Like, he dies, and news gets back to Maury. So this really sets Maury off completely now. So, unbeknownst to Adela, and unbeknownst to her family, that this has occurred, like, that he's, what I mean, like, so now Maury's a few days later, I guess, they have the mother come down to the prison to identify her son, and she obviously is distraught and crying. She doesn't even know what to say. Then they have a funeral, and now obviously Maury's on the run. So as the funeral's happening, you see Maury like standing on a hill high above the actual cemetery with his friends, and he's screaming, his brother's name, and literally like he's like, Johnny, I'm gonna get that bitch, because he's blaming everything on Adela. He's blaming everything on her, even though now, again, completely, she's more than, reasonable. But again, like this, and I like even my description of the character, the Maury character, isn't doing him any justice, because like he is a grade A bastard. Like when it comes to like movie villains, like he's right up there. So Maury decides, this puts Maury on the path of getting, he's really going to get his fucking revenge now. His brother's died, he's putting it on her. She didn't get him out fast enough like he told her, so now Adela is going through, she's at home, with her children and with her mother-in-law, and she's going through her husband's old stuff, and we're seeing sort of David process his father being gone, because he's paying attention. He's coming into the room, watching his mother look at his father's old clothes, and her mother-in-law with her, and David is clearly sentimental and missing his father, and the discussion is happening about what to do with some of his old stuff, and the mother says to Adela that she needs to get rid of the house in the country, because it's just too much. David was killed there, it's just too much. And then she tells her mother-in-law that she can't do it yet, because the kids weren't there when their father was murdered, and it's the one place that they associate their father with during the holidays, and that they're going to go out there and spend Christmas there, at least this Christmas, and then afterwards they'll figure out what to do with it. But she's going to take the kids there, and of course the mother-in-law is going to be there too, because the family is going to spend Christmas together after this horrible tragedy. So boom, so they all go down to spend Christmas as a family, and grieve the loss of George. Now, as they're wrapping up presents, and the kids are the kids are in bed or whatever, the kids, David doesn't really want to go to bed, but they make him go to bed or whatever, and David doesn't really believe in Santa Claus, and there's even a moment where David's playing with friends out there that he has out in the villa, and he no one's around, and he shows his friends the shotgun, and he shows his friends his father's shotgun, the one that he went hunting with him with, and he shows them the shell. He's like, look, this is my shell, and he shows them where it is, and he's playing with it. He's like, but nobody can tell, don't tell my mom or whatever. Boom. So because they've been staying there, because the plan is to stay there for the holidays. But it is Christmas Eve night, forgive my kind of Pulp Fiction non-linear hopping in and out of different moments in the movie as I recap this shit, but bear with me. We're coming to the end here. Now it's Christmas night, and it's just Adela and her mother-in-law, and they're talking, and she hears some noise. And she figures, oh, it's the kids, they're still up. We've told you to go to bed already. Boom. And as she goes to look, it's not the kids. It's fucking Maury. It's Maury and Travolta and the other flunky whose name really isn't important, because the guy really doesn't have that many lines. He's just there all the time doing evil shit. He's a henchman, goon, minion type fucking guy. But they're here. And this is the moment in the movie where it goes there. Okay, so Maury, and I didn't mention that she sees Maury, but it's not just Maury and his guys. They also have the children. So he has David, in one arm, and then another one has the little girl. They got their mouth covered, and everyone's in the living room now. And of course, now Maury is fucking, at this point, he's fucking really just completely out of his fucking, he's blaming the death of his brother on Adela, and he's, you know, like this is when it really goes down. Now again, it's a very fucked up what really happens. And then let me just tell you again, this is the moment where I say, yo, this is the moment in the movie, you know, and now it's at the very end, but it does not, like, Maury takes Adela, strips her, you know what I mean, and proceeds to, you know, assault her and rape her in front of both her children and her mother-in-law, while all they can do is look on, helpless, because again, there's two other men there, right? Now, that if that wasn't bad enough, like if that wasn't bad enough, that Maury's literally forcing himself on top of her, and like she makes eye contact with her son. Now, obviously, her daughter's crying. You know, her mother-in-law is like speechless. She's horrified. She can't, you know, and the son and David locks eyes with his mother, and she just see this moment where like literally this fucking piece of shit is on top of her grunting, and she locks eyes with her son, and there's this moment where she just sort of like shakes her head at him, like, you know, just don't look. It's just. But also she's showing strength in that moment too, because she's like, her face is just like, she's disassociated, like almost to being like resolved to like, yo, she's just more worried about and concerned about, you know, her son and her children and in and out of that moment, right? So in this moment of like, you know, absolute, like, she's not a victim. Like, she is a victim. I'm not saying that, I'm not trying to like discount what's happening, because it is fucking, she's a victim here, but like she doesn't, like in that moment though, where you see the change in her, the resolve in her. It's like she's choosing to not like live in the victimhood of the moment, because she knows her child is watching. It's just powerful shit. You know what I'm saying? Forgive me for not, you know, articulating, you know, like how I feel, like, again, like, and maybe I'm saying like, I'm not like saying like it's some sort of like, but it does have it's like, this is a very kind of, it is for obvious reasons. It is a scene that is just, yeah, like it's a rough scene. But in that, there's moments in that where you're like, yo, that's just really, you know, it's, yeah, I mean, but as this is occurring, right, David, eventually he runs off, because, you know, like, they're not really worried about, you know, like, David for some reason. Like, they're really holding the little girl, and like the fucking the mother-in-law, because she's like putting up a little fight a little bit, like, so David runs off towards his room or whatever. Now Maury pulls himself off of her, and like, and again, there's this moment where like, and again, I'm telling you, like, he's gone limp. Okay, and I don't, you know, like, and I don't know if it's like him. He's like some sick bastard that's getting off on like, he's just getting off on like the sadism of doing this to this woman or whatever. But like, there's a point where he's literally like, yo, he's like, yo, warm her up for me. And now he's just been inside this woman, and again, I think it's Travolta. It's either Travolta, if I remember, or it might be the third flunky guy. The third flunky guy literally begins to put his face. He performs. He starts to. Okay. Again, like, this is. I've already put the content warning. He literally begins to go down on Adela, like. He says to it, and I don't know where they do that at. Like, they do that in Spain in the 80s. I don't know, bro. Where they do that at? That's fucking weird. But like, again, these guys are like, again, like, just this is what it is. So while he's like soft and like literally like trying to, like, they literally show him like with his flaccid penis, like flaccid dick, attempting to like you know, arouse himself by playing with himself, and the other, he tells one of his fucking flunkies to fucking like warm her up, so he like literally starts to go down on her, and of course Adela's in there, she's disassociated, but she's just like, can't believe, for obvious reasons, it's just fucked up. But then what he decides to do is he says, warm her up, and you see the sadistic look in his eye, because he can't get it up. He grabs a bottle of alcohol and pours it on Adela's pubic hair. Then he grabs one of the like a log from the fireplace because they have the fireplace lit, on Christmas Eve, and then he takes that flaming like piece of wood and literally puts it to Adela's pubic hair, burning her. Yes, this is what happens in this fucking movie, right? So this is again, like I told you, when it goes there in this moment, it really goes there. It's really fucking like, it's rough. It ain't like, what I mean? It's fucking rough. Now, Adela obviously screams in pain, but then Maury just says, he looks to, he says, okay, now warm her up. And now, when he first said it, I was like, wait a minute, is he talking about, he's not, I hope, in my mind, I'm like, oh, he must be talking about warm up the mother-in-law, who's a very old woman, easily 60, 70 years old, 60s, 70s, whatever. And I'm like, but no, he's talking about the daughter, Laura, who's like, again, like 6 years old. So I'm horrified at this point. I'm like, yo, I'm already like, these guys are like, what has already occurred? You're thinking like, oh God, no, like, let's not go there. Like, and if it would have went there, honestly, truthfully, I probably would be like, yo, this movie, I would have been completely, like I said, like, I couldn't even, like, again, like, there's just certain things with movies, like, I've seen it all. I've seen all sorts of, like, transgressive shit. But I was just like, yeah, that's just like, if they would have did that, which, fortunately, it doesn't, because when he says that, right, and you think, oh, no, they're going to start fucking with, the little girl, right, a gunshot goes off, hitting the guy, one of the guys, I think it's Travolta, hitting Travolta, who has the little girl. Boom. Then they look, and another gunshot goes off, killing the other guy. And it's David. David has went back into the room and grabbed the shotgun, his father's shotgun. So David shoots both of Maury's fucking flunkies, kills both of them. Boom, instantly. Shoots both of them. Now, Maury grabs Adela and backs towards the door, using her as a shield. And then as he gets to the door, he opens it, and then he lets go of her and runs out. Now, Adela screams to her son, give me the shotgun. And at this point, you're like, yes, give her the shotgun. So David gives his mom the shotgun. Now, Adela takes a shot, boom, misses the first time, but then she fires again, and she clips it. She clips Maury running. So he falls. Boom. So she's standing there in a robe, open robe with a shotgun, naked. You know what I'm saying? Her two children behind her. You know what I mean? Now, let me say this. When I mentioned that, like, when Maury gestures to one of his friends to warm up the daughter, like warm her up, and I'm like, oh shit. And I was like, it might have. I was thinking initially, are they talking about, like, the grandmother? No, it wasn't. But again, like, that just shows you where I'm like, yo, they're not gonna go there, right? They weren't talking about her, but they were. But the grandmother, like, it's not even sure if she survived, because she gets clubbed over the head with a fire poker by Travolta. It might have been Travolta, or one of the guys, Travolta or the other guy, clubs her over the head while the whole, like, rape struggle shit is going on. So she's literally, like, boom. So she's possibly dead, or at the very least unconscious, right? But you see Adela standing there, her two children watching on, and she's got the shotgun, naked with a robe on, and she's like, all right, at this point, she's, this is the moment where she's like, let me just, there's a moment in the film, okay, which the title Hunting Ground comes from, where Laura talks about, there's a line specifically about, again, when it comes to her own belief system and how, like, she can't be, if life was a hunting ground, like, then she wouldn't know what to do with herself.
There are good people and there are bad people of all political leanings, That's the way it is.
Maybe I'm being naive, but I need to trust humanity. The day I come to believe the whole world is a hunting ground, life will begin to lose all sense for me.
This is what the movie's built to. So she's literally stalking this man with a shotgun, in the night. So he's scrambling around, and she's looking for him, and he's hit now. He's bleeding, but he's hiding or whatever, and she's looking, and she can't find him. It's dark or whatever. And he actually surprises her and, like, gets her to drop the shotgun because he, like, leaps out at her, and then, like, she's crawling. You know, there's a little brief struggle. But, again, he's hit. Maury's hit. He's bleeding. So she's able to fight him off and find the shotgun again as Maury's, like, trying to escape, right? And she recomposes herself, gets back to her feet as Maury's fleeing, but she finds the shotgun, and she's looking around, and the kids are looking on this whole time, watching their mother, from the house, from the doorway, and the kids see Maury by the car, and they yell, "Hey, Mom, they say by the car." So she goes over to to get Maury, and she comes up to him, and he turns to her. And she's got the shotgun trained on him. And she's looking at him. And he grabs for it. And then she just fires. And it's just boom. And then you just see, like, this blood splatter just all over the front of Adela. And she's just sitting there. And again, like, it's just this certain moments. Like, this is it's just a visually sort of like, it's so striking of an image, right? She's standing there. And you can kind of, like, see, it's like it's dark. It looks cold, and she's just standing there. And I think you could see a little bit of her breath a little bit, and she's just like blood on her face, in her robe, nothing but a robe and a shotgun, and she's just looking down at this guy whose face she just literally blew off. You know what I mean? And it's just you feel. By this point in the movie, you feel kind of like that you've been through the ringer yourself, like in just watching everything this is built up to, the whole entire movie, the whole shit, like, and that is where the film ends, and that is Hunting Ground. So, if that sounds like the type of film that you'd be interested in watching, I can't recommend it highly enough. Now, again, that is with the sort of like with I just want to give a caveat again to, like, the content, like, because again, what I've described, it is, I described in full detail what happens at the end of this movie, and again, it's not something that, it's not like, again, like, that's why I say, like, it has that exploitation element, but, like, it doesn't feel like, there's certain movies that you watch in this that deal with this, that deal with these same kind of elements, but they do it in a way that is just far more just scummy. You know what I mean? And I feel like Hunting Ground isn't one of those movies. Like, it doesn't shy away from it, for sure. It never shies away from it, and it is unsettling, and it is uncomfortable. And it is, it's rough, but I think as a film, like, it's a well-made, well-directed, well-crafted film, with good performances, and it is my first sort of recommendation, in what I hope to be a ongoing list of recommends from me of works of merit that I believe deserve some kind of like recognition and deserve to be seen by more people. Again, like, the definition of an aberration, by the way, which I'm going to pull up right now, for the purposes of kind of highlighting again what I'm trying to do with this podcast specifically. Okay, the definition of an aberration is a departure. It's a noun, a departure from what is normal, usual, or expected, typically one that is unwelcome. Also, biology, a characteristic that deviates from the normal type. Okay. This is the point of this podcast, okay? Is to talk about things that depart from the normal type of conversations or the type of things that get discussed. And in this specific example, the types of movies that tend to be talked about, okay? And just any sort of, like, again, that idea of something, an aberration, something that deviates from the normal, like, because that's what I'm interested in. I'm not interested in, talking about the Snyder Cut or the Marvel films or whatever new Netflix movie. I'm not interested in that. Like, there's plenty of that out there. If you want that, hey, I'm not here to tell anyone what to like or what not to like. Well, I kind of am. I mean, but you always have the option to disagree with me and say, I don't actually like that, and I don't want to view that, or I don't want to, give that my time, and that's fair, But again, I trust my taste. Like, you know what I mean? And that's the one barometer by which I sort of, that's been my guiding principle, and not only in this, but like in, I'm a writer, and, I'm constantly, making decisions and choices, when I write and into the things I want to create. And that's always been my guiding sort of, it's been my guiding light, like a lighthouse, like my taste is the one thing that, like, I trust. Explicitly, I trust my taste. You know what I mean? And I'm only interested in the things that are not, like on the, like, and let me just say this as I close this out, as I close this first episode out. It's not that I don't like things that are more mainstream, because I do. I have plenty of those same films that people know and love. I have an affinity for a lot of them. As I've gotten older and as my taste is kind of refined, there's some of those I don't anymore. I used to like have an affinity for, and I just outgrew it, because I feel like, we do live in I do agree that, like, most movies, and I've said this to anybody that'll listen, that, like, now movies are made for, like, they're made for adult babies. Like, and that goes, in my opinion, that's beyond, like, just comic book fare. I believe that, like, the majority of movies now are so sanitized and, like, and they're constructed in a way that it has to almost be filtered through this sort of, like, human resource department, in order for it to be disseminated into the world. And we no longer treat adults like adults, because when we talk about, like, subjects that are taboo, are things that, like, are, everyone's favorite word, problematic in nature. There's a tendency to want to but, like, sand off all the edges, right? And present something to you that's a sanitized version. And I feel like we're doing a disservice if we can't, not only just in art, but in, the cultural, conversations that we have, and in the discourse that we have, if we're not able to be adults and address very sort of adult, complex, nuanced issues, subjects across the board, in a way that's like, okay, we recognize this, and not being, because I feel like there is something to be said, right? That is, there is something to be said for people who are considering the feelings of their fellow human beings when they're talking about certain things that may be sensitive, and I'm all for that. I don't want to get this, I don't want to be, I don't want to get it. I want to be very clear when it comes to the things that I'm saying and the opinions I'm putting out there. Now, I see the validity in that. I definitely do. I definitely do. That being said, though, there's another side, another aspect to it, where there's a lot of, like, people who are utilizing, or they're utilizing the current climate to silence people in a way that it has nothing to actually do with what they claim they're doing it for. They're doing it for, self-serving purposes, or because they lack the ability to have a conversation with any sort of nuance or complexity themselves. Therefore, they want to flatten everything. They want to flatten the discourse. They want to flatten, the discourse across the board, whether we're talking about art or not. But again, enough of that. The point of this podcast, is to find and highlight the things that people aren't talking about. The things that people aren't seeing. And hopefully, if anyone listening to this, if I'm able to point out something to them that they didn't know about, and then they go out, they seek it out, and they enjoy it, then the point of my podcast, that to me, like, I've done my job. Like, that's the purpose that I set out to do with this, is to just kind of expose, just the stuff that I'm into to some people, some things that I've come across, some things that I find. And not everything that I bring up on this podcast is some shit that I love. I'll also talk about, stuff that I have conflicted feelings about, or stuff that I maybe even shit. I may even get on here and talk about some shit that I hate. Because I feel like, again, that idea of like, there is validity in criticism, both negative and positive. You know what I mean? There's validity in both. And being able to like articulate why it is you feel a certain way strongly about something, even if that something you feel strongly about falls under the category of I feel strongly about it because I dislike it extremely, even maybe possibly hate that thing. I feel like there's still a lot to be discussed that's actually worthwhile about why you feel something inspired that kind of response from you, and what it is about. So yeah, that's what the goal is with this podcast, is to just kind of, get people, and again, I will be bringing people on to talk about certain things too, because I mean, as much, if you cannot tell, I have a tendency to rant, and I can talk, and I don't necessarily always need somebody right there. And also, sometimes I feel like, sometimes people might not be in the mood to listen to me ramble on about, shit. I have a tendency to do that. And there'll be plenty of situations where I decide I'm going to go solo on this one, but I definitely do enjoy conversation and hearing someone else's perspective and really picking their brain and about, and getting kind of like their opinion on what they may think about something, or or why they feel something is good or why they feel something isn't. So yeah, moving forward, you can expect that to be something that you can hear as well. And with all of that said, this is the first episode of Mutual Aberration Society, and cue the music here.
We belong to a mutual admiration society. My baby and me, we belong to a mutual